Welcome to the Elite Performance Team podcast. Dominic Perlo and Dr. Jan Kaspowitz produce podcasts weekly with information in health and wellness, as well as guests on our podcast. If this is your first time listening, thanks for listening. If you like our content, you can find more information out on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube and iTunes. Today we have Julio Rodriguez, a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu trainer. Welcome, Julio.
Hey, how are you doing, guys?
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu under the Machado brothers, Higa Machado, Carlos Machado, Roger Machado, Jean-Jacques, and Johnny Machado, and Marco Santos.
Very good. Very good. So we start with a quote of the day, and this comes from Renzo Gracie.
Very nice guy.
And his quote is, "The more I train, the luckier I get." Doc, what do you think about that quote?
Well, a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters, they train a lot. So I think with them, you create your own luck with the training that you do. If you put in really good training, cover all your bases, basically create your own luck. And then,
Do you feel that this pertains in other ways too?
yeah, I think with everything, it's all about being prepared.
Right.
You know, you want to be prepared to succeed, but you should also be prepared to fail. So it's like you could go ahead and risk things, but understand how big the risk is, and are you capable of taking that risk. And if you take the risk, then prepare and, you create your own luck, and hopefully everything goes your way.
Couldn't agree more. Julio?
Well, with Jiu-Jitsu, the more you train, the more things can go wrong. So you learn how to deal with them during your rolling, during your training. So it becomes a slippery slope for your opponent. Because if you get in a bad situation, you try a hip bump sweep. The guy defends that. All of a sudden he's in the guillotine. He defends that. You throw him in a triangle. So we're always training with the flow in mind. If things go wrong, what's our next attack?
Absolutely.
Terry actually brought this up too. We had Terry Kerrigan on a while.
My buddy.
Yeah,
One of my
Terry
students.
actually brought up the same thing. It's like you always train as if you're coming from a position of weakness, and like what's the next thing you're going to do. He made up a very good point of it.
Absolutely. And I think this pertains cycling, triathlon, any kind of anything. The more you train, the luckier you get because you've been there before.
Correct.
And that's really what, to me, what it comes down to. If you think you're going to take one Brazilian Jiu Jitsu class or any martial arts and go fight somebody and win,
Absolutely not.
absolutely not. You got to put the work in.
Right. No,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, we drill. There's a saying, drillers makes killers. You have to drill. It doesn't. You don't even have to do the submission attempts, but you got to drill. You got to get to the position before you can go for a submission, and that takes a lot of drilling, a lot of time on the mat.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of muscle memory involved too, because you're in that position. Your brain, your nervous system understands that position. It understands not to get stressed. You can still remain calm because you've been there before, and there's points of reference, so you kind of can relax a little bit more and get out of that position when you know it's broken. Yeah,
And that's so true, because your body the sensitivity of your body being in a position,
Yep.
and the muscle memory's there. But I feel I can roll with my eyes closed. I mean, as long as we're not punching, if we're not fighting. But I'll roll with my students with my eyes closed and feel where he is on my body, and then go from there. And it's absolutely, that muscle memory or that sensitivity is like key,
In the year that I was training this Japanese Jiu-Jitsu,
Right.
I was just starting, I'm an orange belt, but I
Right.
was just starting to do some things blindfolded.
Right.
And he wouldn't let me close my eyes because, you close your eyes, you kind of close them, right?
Right.
So it was blindfolded, and that's a whole nother ballgame.
For sure.
My God.
You're listening for the footsteps.
Right, it's all of it, it's totally different.
Right.
So you train fighters?
I do. I do. I kind of pick and choose who I train to fight in MMA now. It's a slippery slope. You get guys that come in and they'll take what you give them and they'll jump ship and go to other teams. So I don't really train fighters unless you grew up in my system. If you went through my system, or if you come referred by someone else that I respect, I might. But I don't train fighters as much. I have some students that do compete, so we do a lot of more competition and stuff. But I'm more about the self-defense.
So, how is it training people for self-defense as opposed to like somebody who wants to compete?
I mean, with self-defense is you're getting grabbed, like women, children, you know, getting bullied. I mean, that bullying in the United States is crazy now. Little kids and people even hanging themselves and cyberbullying and stuff. But the self-defense is, I don't know how to explain it. It gives it, jiu-jitsu empowers you. It does. You're gonna be able to deal with kids making fun of you, because you're not afraid of what they got. You know.
Yeah, I don't want to go off topic with it, but it's like, you know, I'm 46. Dom, you're 43.
I'm 42. I'm 43.
42.
59.
59. So back in our day, we had coping mechanisms. You either got punched or you punched somebody. So you had a coping mechanism. And you know, it's either you fought, but the thing, you stuck up for yourself majority of the time.
For sure.
Now it's a majority of the time, these kids have no coping mechanisms because they're basically, and I don't have kids. And I understand the trials and tribulations of having children as well, but I've seen people my age with kids who successfully have given their kids coping mechanisms to the point where they don't get no participation trophy, they don't get no certificate that they achieved something when they actually didn't, and then they stick up for themselves. So that's one thing I've noticed, that a lot of kids these days, they just don't know how to stick up for themselves, you know?
That's true. I had just recently have a student who has Asperger's.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big well, at the time he was 12 years old. So a big 12-year-old.
Sure.
And he was training with me for 2 years. And one day he comes into class and he goes, "Professor, I have to tell you something. You might be mad at me." I said, "B, what? What happened?" He goes, "My bully, I confronted my bully." I go, "What?" He goes, "My bully started with me. I grabbed him. I did osotogari to him. I got on him and I negotiated with him like you taught me." And I said, "What'd you tell me?" He goes, "I told him to leave me alone. If not, I was gonna hurt him."
See, that's excellent, totally.
No, for sure. I go, "Big, I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you, actually." Now you know
That's
that
awesome.
it just empowers you that you don't have to deal with somebody taking advantage of you and with you. And he was 12 years old, 6'1", and like 195.
See, that goes to a certain extreme with bullies, because I am not sticking up for bullying at all. I got bullied as a kid. My first
Right.
name is Jan. No, it's actually pronounced Jan. Nobody calls you Jan in first grade. They sing you the Brave Bunch song your entire life.
Right.
A lot of things rhyme with Jan. So the issue is with sometimes the bully's right. You know, when a bully's telling you that you suck at a specific sport, well, maybe you do suck.
Right.
So you maybe need to sometimes take a grain of salt with what they're saying, and maybe just getting picked on. There's a total difference between violently being aggressive towards somebody and really bullying them to the point where there's nothing somebody can do. But there's another point where a kid's a kid who's pointing out your weakness. So you have two options. And Dom had a great story with your son. I thought that was fantastic. Where it's one kid kind of told your son he's not that good in basketball, and your advice is, let's go practice hoops.
That's it.
No, for sure.
You
You
know,
get better.
'cause sometimes the bully's right sometimes.
And I think it goes back to what you said, though. If you don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with somebody telling you you're not as good as you might think you are, you're falling apart. You know, and to go a step further with that, Doc, a lot of parents are spoon feeding the kids,
Totally.
spoiling the shit out of them. And then what? Then they hear no, or they don't get what they want, and they don't know how to deal with it because they've been their whole life getting it. And you know, it's an epidemic that's not going to go away. It's just I don't see a.
I think it's bad parenting.
Right.
I always told my children, you want to do something, you're not quitting. You do it the year, you do it
Start,
the
you finish.
season, Whatever you start, you're gonna
Sports.
finish.
School,
Yeah,
sports, it's
yeah,
it.
it's-
You start, you finish. Then you want to quit? You don't want to go back next year?
Yeah,
No
you wanna try
problem.
something else? Okay,
No
great.
problem. But you're gonna finish.
Yeah.
Finish
My son
what you
wrestled. My son wrestled. He's a good wrestler. He wrestled until he was 10. He goes, Dad, I want to try basketball. You gonna tell the coach, right? Because the wrestling coach expects you to come out. He goes, I'll tell the coach. He did it, and he played basketball. Was a good basketball player also. He was lucky. He was a very good athlete.
I have a similar story with my son. So he's been playing baseball since he's 4.
Right.
This kid used to set chairs up in our living room and dress in a full Yankees outfit to watch the Yankee games, holding his mitt the whole time. And we got to a point where he wanted to keep the book of the actual professional games. We would keep the book. And I coached him through travel teams. And he was always one of the better ones on the kid. You know,
Right.
maybe one of the top 5 kids on the team. And he did no outside training. He never did anything. He showed up to the practices. He was just gifted.
Right.
And then he did his little league. He didn't want to play his last year little league. I forced him. Mistake. He doesn't play baseball anymore.
And then it becomes. Then when you get to high school and you didn't do that extra training, you didn't go to those camps, and now all of a sudden you're in high school and
Whoa.
yeah, like everybody's good.
Right.
Then you don't start.
Right.
Guess what? You know how you start?
Better
You do
training.
extra training.
Gotta create your own
Exactly.
luck.
You got to create your own luck by training.
Yeah.
Right. It goes back to that quote.
The more you train.
Julio, you also train different demographics, right? Women, kids.
Yes.
How is that for you personally? How is it with training different demographics? Is it
Well,
challenging?
I treat them all. Grandmaster Mansour, who's a red belt grandmaster, he says all my black belts are my children, and I want to take it a step further. All my students are my children, like because I sweat, I bled, I was sore forever. So whatever I give to my students is like the knowledge. So with women, I never want to see a woman be taken advantage of or be in a bad relationship and get beat up or, domestic violence. And kids, I work for the school system. I work for the North Bergen Board of Ed. So I kind of talk to the kids that are a little rough around the edges on the side and, listen, it's not nice. You gotta be nice. But I just love anybody who's willing to learn. I love teaching. It's fulfilling for me. It's actually more fulfilling than watching one of my MMA fighters win.
Are you still working with the Board of Ed?
Yeah.
So when you speak to these kids, do these kids know your capacity of jiu-jitsu? They know
I mean, some of them do, some of them don't. I think my principal has told some people that they do martial arts, but they don't know to the extent.
Sure.
And I don't show it off either.
What other disciplines do you train?
Well, I started out at USA Goju Karate with Soke Sensei Peter Urban when I was 8. So I did Filipino martial arts. I competed at the World Championships in I trained with Doce Pares Eskrima. I trained Muay Thai with Grandmaster K, Kumramba Tayana. He's right out of Patterson. 78 years old, makes me look slow. He makes me look slow. I swear to God, he's unbelievable.
Wow.
If you ever want to see him just hit the bag, it's sick. I've trained Krav Maga. I got a black belt in Hapkido also. So
Interesting. Which one do you like the most?
still teaching jiu-jitsu, so I guess it's jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, right.
I'd still like to train Muay Thai, and like when I train fighters, I'll train more Muay Thai. So like every other Sunday I'll go see Master K and do a private with him. So just to keep my skills up.
How many days are you training per week compared to instructing? Or are you doing it both on the same day?
I do both.
Or do you consider even instructing part of your training?
I'll do the technique. I'll show them. I'll teach it. Correct. Then I'll teach it again, and then add on. So I'll do the same technique about 20 times as I'm teaching it. Yeah.
When you're teaching, is it in the different experience levels that you have the classes in? Or is it a bigger group setting?
Sometimes I have private classes, one-on-one. That's how I train Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Terry took group classes too. The bigger group setting, I'll have one of my brown belts. I'll do the techniques of my brown belt 5, 6 times, and then we'll follow along, and then I'll do it this way, and I'll correct each one. I said, no, do it to me. I want to make sure you have the right leverage.
Good, so it's like basically hands-on with the students.
Oh, for sure. I roll with my students because I feel I need to be able to evaluate them firsthand. I can't just see it, and I need to feel it. So
Sure.
I like to roll with my students. And I try to roll with all my students. At the end of the teaching aspects, we roll, we kind of spar. So I'll try and roll with 4 or 5 students. So that's how I get my training too.
Do you do anything aside from that type of training, like any kind of whatever, lifting, cardio, anything like that?
I should. I don't. I think I just do jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai for myself. I don't run. I don't train. I diet. Like right now, I'm not because it's the holidays. But next week I'll start my keto diet and drop the 20 pounds I put on.
I mean, 30 seconds of fighting feels like an eternity.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's-
Listen, I roll 20, 30 minutes every day with a human body. So
you're getting that.
I get some cardio. I mean, I could stand up and fight for 20 minutes, like because there's lows, you know. I couldn't run for 20 minutes. I don't think I could run for 20 minutes.
How about competition-wise? Do you do any competition?
I'm gonna start. Well, you spoke about Terry. Terry's gonna get me ready for the World's Masters, and I'm gonna train and compete in August
Nice.
in Vegas. At BJJ World Masters.
Through your career, 51 years, what injuries have you dealt with?
Torn pec, shoulder, both knees, arthroscopic surgery on my wrist. I've had some injections in my my S1, L4, L5.
Wow.
And these were from training or from competing?
Could be just wear and tear.
Sure.
This was the teared up, the torn pec was from training for sure. I heard the pop and everything. I said, oh, I thought my shoulder went out of place. I said, let me go to the doctors. Went to the hospital, they took an x-ray. Oh no, it's negative. And then I was, 4 days later, I see, oh man, it's full of blood. I must have torn something. He says, I went. He said, oh no, it could be a slight tear, don't worry about it. I was brushing my teeth, and I'm like, oh man. Like I saw crepey skin right here in the crease. I went to the doctor, he had writing a script, and I said, what, just meds? He goes, no, this is for an MRI, you probably need surgery. So I had a torn pec.
How long did that keep you out?
You could ask Doug. I had surgery. I was maybe out 2 weeks, and I put my arm in a sling, and I put my hand in the gi, and I rolled with
Oh, fantastic.
with one arm.
What?
But they didn't attack this arm.
That's great. That's great. And your knees, you had surgery, both knees?
Both knees I had torn meniscus. They feel good. I mean, I don't feel. I have a little crepiness, I guess, but they work.
When your clients come, is it just fighting training, or are they doing other things like whatever, calisthenics?
Oh
type
no,
stuff?
we do. We warm up.
Warm up.
We have a good 10 to 15 minute warm up. We do the break falls, as you know, it's Japanese jiu-jitsu. You got to warm up that body for your break falls and stuff, and just to get that muscle memory. You don't want to fall on your wrist and break your wrist. Definitely.
I used to try to show up early all the time and just spend time on the mat by
Right.
myself. I would roll a little bit, and I would really try to, my wrist was worse.
Right.
I just try to, get that good stretch
Yeah,
through,
so when they kotogaeshi you.
Oh,
good,
that's
yeah.
it. That's the
Yeah.
worst. That's the worst.
Kotogaeshi is a wrist lock like this.
I think it means wrist turnout in
Right.
Japanese. So it's a twist like that.
And
It's
you
so
have to
painful.
do an aerial fall or else it's gonna hurt.
So you literally go in the air and then land on the mat.
Right.
It's
Yeah, it's probably the most common injury I see from jiu-jitsu is wrist issues.
Right.
It's basically the muscles in between your radius and the ulna that get overstretched. Yeah, actually, that one patient was coming in, basically, the one thing that you want to get back on the mat, but if you re-injure it, you're going to be out for another couple of
It
weeks.
takes longer,
It
for
takes
sure.
a long time.
Yeah, that's the worst part. We were talking before the podcast, you know, and I'm an avid runner.
Right.
I'm training for a marathon, and you know, it's like this sketchy little thing, you know, like even a wrong turn in an aerial or landing, there goes my ankle.
Right.
Then I'm not running.
Right, for
you
sure.
know? So it's hard to prioritize. Like I want to do it so much more, but at the same time, I don't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
You know.
We had an interesting conversation before we started about, we mentioned how Doug started out Doug Pate owns a DP Martial Arts over in Westwood, who's a previous guest on our podcast. And we're here at the office, we're starting work with the Veterans Committee. We're going to be cycling in 4 or 5 veterans per month. As one finishes up therapy, we're going to bring another one. There's no fee for what we do. You mentioned something about your G's for GIs?
Right, gis. Gis are uniforms.
Yep.
So there's a group of people that they get their used gis and stuff, have them washed, and they send them to veterans that are starting jiu-jitsu or, you know, any martial art. I think Brazilian Jiu Jitsu has helped. It's been proven. I don't have the information on hand, but with their stress and stuff,
Sure.
because being on the bottom of another human being holding you down is stressful.
Sure.
And if you can't get up, you start hyperventilating and stuff. But going through the process helps you deal with those type of stresses. So I remember being on the bottom of a big guy, and I couldn't get up, and I almost had a panic attack.
Sure.
And little by little, it lessened, and I think that's why jiu-jitsu is helping some of these veterans, and so, you know, some of their issues also. I know there's the IBJJF has para competition, para grappling tournaments. So
Interesting.
it's really cool what they're coming up with.
A lot of Navy SEALs.
Yeah, that's what I was about to mention.
Yeah, they go to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Well,
Yeah.
I should say Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, the two
One
most
of the
common-
most Jocko and
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect example. 2 most common things that a lot of the military do is, especially the SEALs, they do surfing.
right.
Because surfing is, if you ever been in a flotation tank, it basically helps you, you know, you basically put you in a position where you're nice and relaxed. And they also do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Right.
And then that's the 2 things that a lot of them use to basically help, I'm not saying control, but help regulate some of their PTSD, because, you know, they get anxiety and panic attacks as well. But also gives them a sense of calm, because now they know that they don't have to come in with their chest sticking out, because they know they can kick your ass.
Right.
So it gives them a sense of calm, where they don't even need to get into a fight, because they know they can win anyway. So it gives them that sense of peace, totally.
We have
They're creating their own luck.
Pat Trey, a Navy SEAL team guy in one of our affiliates in Virginia. I'm trying to figure out the town. His school is Trident Martial Arts. He's a real bad dude. He's just a very well trained dude. Not
Sure,
bad.
experienced.
Yeah, so then Frank Cucci's another martial artist. I know Jocko Wilnick. Yeah, he does jiu-jitsu. There's so many. A few of my friends that are Marines. Well, they're never ex-Marines. They're always Marines. They do jiu-jitsu too, and they were special operators as well.
Do you train a lot of police officers?
Being an ex-police officer, I think that I have some. I do have some, but police officers in general have to let go of their ego and not think about most. I'm probably going to be hated on, but I don't care. Most cops don't want the citizenry to know that they really can't fight. They don't. They won't go to a martial arts school because they'll put themselves out there. Wow, this guy's a cop. He's protecting me. He can't really fight. So, and those, you went to Bergen County Police Academy, right?
Yes, sir.
Those 2 weeks they gave us wasn't enough. I mean, I had already trained 20-something years in martial arts. Those 2 weeks